Seed oils. Seed oils might be the single most hated thing in your kitchen right now. The internet swears they're inflaming you, poisoning you, slowly killing you from the inside. Here's the part that'll start a fight in the comments. When you stack up the human studies, seed oils turn out to be one of the most wrongly accused things on this entire list. The headline charge is inflammation. The theory says an omega-6 fat in these oils, called linoleic acid, converts into an inflammatory compound once it's inside you. It sounds convincing, right up until somebody tests it in people. Researchers pooled 36 human trials, and even when they fed people far more linoleic acid than what is normally consumed, the amount of that inflammatory compound barely moved. Only a sliver of linoleic acid actually converts. Trial after trial, the inflammation markers in the blood didn't rise. A few of them even dropped. Then comes heart disease. A study following 68,000 people across 13 countries found that the ones with the most linoleic acid in their blood had the lowest rates of heart disease and stroke, the exact opposite of what you'd expect. But what about that one study people love to wave around, where seed oils seem deadly? That trial used 1960s margarine loaded with around 15% trans fat, a genuinely toxic fat we've since banned outright. The harm came from the trans fat. The famous seed oils kill study was measuring a different poison the entire time. Even the cancer claim, the scariest version going around, traces back to mice and to tumor cells in a dish, where the oil was added to cancers that already existed. It was never shown to start one. Across 4 million real people, the cancer link simply isn't there. There's one fair criticism left standing. Seed oils get poured into nearly every ultra-processed food on the shelf, so they ride shotgun with diets that genuinely wreck you. They're a passenger in that car. They were never the one behind the wheel. Gas stoves. Every time you click on a gas burner, it fills your kitchen with a gas tied to asthma in children. It doesn't stay put either. It drifts down the hall into the bedrooms and hangs in the air for hours after the flame is out. The gas is nitrogen dioxide, and it forms whenever natural gas burns. It's a known lung irritant, and the unsettling part is the speed. In a real kitchen, levels can blow past safety limits within minutes of lighting one burner. A 2024 study out of Stanford sampled the air in more than 100 homes, and from that data, researchers estimated gas and propane stoves were responsible for roughly 200,000 cases of childhood asthma in the US alone. Now, the honest caveat, because this one turned political. Much of the evidence is correlational, and the headline numbers come from estimates rather than hard counts. Where the effect shows up most is in kids who already have asthma. Some researchers think the numbers are overblown, partly because the whole subject got swept up in the fight over banning gas. But nobody argues the core of it. Burning gas indoors makes the air harder to breathe. You don't need to switch to electric. Just run the range hood every time you cook and make sure it vents outside instead of blowing air back at you. Crack a window and use the back burners, which sit closer to the vent. That clears out most of it. Cell phones. There's a phone glued to the side of your head for hours a day and a tower down the street firing 5G in every direction. People are scared of both. The strongest evidence we have says you can let that fear go. In 2024, the World Health Organization had a team comb through more than 5,000 studies and zero in on the 63 strongest. Across all of them, no link turned up between cell phone use and brain cancer, not even in people who'd been heavy users for more than a decade. The reason is, just like microwaves, the radio waves your phone gives off are non-ionizing. They don't carry the energy needed to damage DNA. Now for the towers, because that's where the 5G fear really lives. It's backwards. The tower sits hundreds of feet away, and that kind of energy drops off sharply with distance, while your phone presses right against your skull. The tower hits you with a smaller dose than the phone in your hand. If the phone is fine, and the evidence says it is, the tower down the block is nothing. One honest note, so this doesn't sound like a sales pitch. An international group of scientists still pushes back hard and argues the all clear came too easily. They're a minority, and the weight of the evidence isn't with them, but the question is still being asked. The real-world tell is tough to argue with, though. Phone use exploded for 30 straight years, and brain cancer rates never followed it up. BPA. A few years ago, Europe cut the safe daily dose of a chemical in plastic by around 20,000 times. Not 20%, 20,000 times. The chemical is BPA, short for bisphenol A, and the bottle in your bag might be full of its replacement, which may be just as bad. BPA's trouble is that it impersonates estrogen. It slides into the same receptors your real hormones use and scrambles the signal, which makes it what scientists call an endocrine disruptor, a chemical that interferes with your hormone system. The worry grew serious enough that it was stripped out of baby bottles years ago, and then Europe gutted the safe limit over new evidence about how it hits your immune system. This is a real concern, not a myth. But there's also a twist nobody saw coming. When BPA got banned, companies swapped in close chemical cousins called BPS and BPF, then slapped BPA-free on the label like a badge of honor. The trouble is, those replacements hit your hormones the same way, sometimes harder. Scientists even have a name for the maneuver. They call it a regrettable substitution. BPS now turns up in the urine of about 8 in 10 people. So BPA-free often just means they switch to a chemical nobody's gotten around to regulating yet. The thing you can actually control is heat. The single biggest force driving these chemicals out of the plastic and into you is warmth. Never microwave food in plastic. Never leave your water bottle baking in a hot car. Get anything hot away from plastic and into glass or steel, and the heat's got nothing to drive into you. Candles and air fresheners. That cozy vanilla candle and the plug-in freshener in your hallway are both doing something you don't even think about, feeding a steady haze of chemicals into the air you breathe all evening. It's not the catastrophe a few corners of the internet scream about. It's also not the harmless little mood booster it pretends to be. Burn a candle, especially the cheap paraffin kind, and it releases fine soot plus real pollutants into the room. Formaldehyde, which is a known cause of cancer, and benzene, which causes blood cancers like leukemia. In a candle, those aren't contaminants that slipped in by accident like benzene was in sunscreen. They're what burning petroleum wax naturally gives off. Studies measuring the air during candle burning have found formaldehyde rising well past the level health agencies call safe, and fine particle pollution in a closed room spiking far beyond the World Health Organization's limit. Air fresheners and plug-ins do a version of the same thing without the flame, leaking the same family of compounds into the air around the clock. The amount is what decides everything. One candle in a room that gets fresh air isn't worth a second thought. At that level, your body clears it and moves on. The danger builds when you trap it. A sealed bedroom, 3 plug-ins running non-stop, a candle burning every night for years. That's the exposure that earns the word carcinogen, and it hits hardest in anyone with asthma or weak lungs, where it can set off a full attack. It's not that you need to throw your candles out. Just crack a window, choose soy or beeswax over paraffin, and don't turn a closed room into a sealed scent chamber. Burned with airflow, it's a small thing. Sealed in and breathed all night, it's the kind of thing that adds up. Tap water. The water coming out of your kitchen tap has something in it that a federal court just called an unreasonable risk to children. The thing in question is fluoride, the same stuff added to keep your teeth from rotting. The science on it took a hard turn in the last 2 years. In 2024, a U.S. government review pulled together hundreds of studies and concluded with moderate confidence that higher fluoride exposure is linked to lower IQ in children. Out of 55 brain studies they examined, 52 pointed the same direction. A federal judge looked at that pile of evidence and ordered the EPA to act, ruling that fluoridated water poses an unreasonable risk to kids' developing brains. What that ruling failed to mention is the dose. Evidence indicates that IQ problems have shown up where the fluoride in the water is way above what's used in U.S. community fluoridation, around twice the level or more. At the low amount in normal American tap water, the same review said there wasn't enough data to prove harm. The court still wasn't satisfied. But you should know the scary findings come from doses significantly higher than what's coming out of your faucet. Fluoride is only half the story, though. Millions of Americans get water through aging pipes that can leach lead, and those same forever chemicals we covered with non-stick pans in part 1 of this video are in a lot of tap water too. The EPA finally set limits on how much of them is allowed in drinking water in 2024, then started rolling those limits back in 2025. You might think bottled water is the answer. It isn't. Tests have found those same forever chemicals in a majority of bottled brands, with no rule forcing anyone to check. And bottled water hits you with something tap doesn't. One study found a single liter held nearly 250,000 plastic particles, far more than what comes out of your tap. Switch to bottled water, and you'd only be swapping one problem for a mouthful of the microplastics we started this whole series with. A decent carbon or reverse osmosis filter on your tap deals with most of this. The lead, the forever chemicals, and the fluoride if you want it gone. That's a better answer than paying for plastic bottles that hand you something worse. Fluorescent lighting. The lights humming over your head have been blamed for headaches, ruined sleep, and even disease. Most of that's overblown, but there's a small, real piece worth knowing. Older fluorescent tubes can flicker faster than your eye consciously registers, and for some people, that flicker triggers headaches and eye strain. They also hold a little mercury, which only matters if one shatters or gets thrown in the trash, but that's a disposal issue, nothing that affects you when the light's on. There's no credible evidence that ordinary indoor lighting causes any disease. You might figure switching to LED solves all of it. It fixes the mercury and most of the flicker, but it brings its own problems. LEDs put out a lot of blue light, even more than the old bulbs, and blue light is the same thing we got into with screens back in part 1. At night, it tells your brain it's still daytime and holds off the sleep signal. The cool LED you installed to see better is the one keeping you awake. During the day, that blue light's doing you a favor, keeping you alert. It only turns on you after dark. So in the evening, switch to warmer, dimmer bulbs and let your body finally get the message that it's nighttime. When the sun's still up, the lights overhead aren't doing any harm. Cast iron and aluminum cookware. We open this series by convicting your non-stick pan. It's only fair to end it by acquitting the other two in your cabinet, because the pans your grandmother cooked on are the ones you need to worry about least. Start with aluminum. You may have heard it causes Alzheimer's, and that's the same mix-up from the deodorant story, born from dialysis patients, not from anyone's frying pan. A little aluminum can leach into very acidic foods, like a tomato sauce left simmering for hours, but the amount is tiny next to what you already get from ordinary food, and healthy kidneys clear it out. Plus, the anodized kind of aluminum barely leaches at all. Then there's cast iron, which isn't just safe, it can actually do you a small favor. It puts a trace of iron into your food, the same iron your blood is built from, which is a bonus for most people. The only exception is the rare few whose bodies already store too much. Cook on either one without worry. The villain in this kitchen was always the slick synthetic coating, never the bare metal underneath. The beat-up skillet that's older than you are is the one thing here you can completely trust. Everything in this video comes from what science says right now, but right now is constantly changing. Half the stuff on this list was considered perfectly safe until a study came along and rewrote the story. You might think that's science failing, but it's really science at work.